pretty much like to focus on during the Holocaust.
Yeah, but you have to realize that when this is not, are you ready? You ready to make that as an opening statement? My during the Holocaust was completely different than the people who experienced the Holocaust. I was living here, I was a kid, and most people here, even adults, didn't know. Secondly, you have to realize, if you have, if you have any history of how the Holocaust worked, it wasn't Holocaust. Different times and different. In other words, when they were already killing Jews in Poland and Russia, German Jews were still fairly safe, except if you were some crazy dissident you're talking about. Because America had entered the war yet. After December 8th, 7th, and 8th, when war was declared not only in Japan but on the Axis, Japan, Germany, and Italy, it became a new war. And then things got very bad, but we weren't there. I was here.
Well, I guess we're going to ask you what your life was like during wartime,
Right.
I suppose. Yeah.
I can tell you how I got out. I can tell you some of the things. It was interesting. Yesterday I made a condolence call, and someone talked about that family getting out to a Portuguese line through Spain and France. Oh yeah, but then they were sent back. But they were sent back, and we were sent back. So we were obviously on a different trip. So now. So what specifically you want me to talk about?
Well, I think you talked about last week. We talked about your childhood in Germany, and I guess we're going to ask you if you remembered anything when we left.
Yeah.
Or like if you remembered anything that you wanted to say now, or no.
Yeah. You know, you got me all bad. I started remembering toys. I remember one or two more, but nothing.
Well, can you tell us, do you think, when you're first conscious of that the war had begun for
Well,
Germany?
just done was the beginning. And actually I talk about that as I told you, I wish I could know that that's paper by this Holocaust committee to the museum. And we talked about them breaking into the house, and I'm not going to repeat that.
Actually, could you repeat it for us? Because I don't know.
But I remember I was saying that I definitely didn't know. I didn't even think the adults knew. And then all of a sudden the knocks started flying through the windows. My father got arrested. And my father was on the river. Couldn't swim, but I pushed him out. They have to realize that in the First World War, my father and my uncles were soldiers in the German army. They were not people who were out of the basic society. They were soldiers. They served their country. They were proud of it. They didn't run. That's a separate thing. My uncle was in the front. My father was guarding prisoners, and he was shorter than all the prisoners. I once asked the prisoners, I said, he said, oh, that's to protect Katz, so no one touches me. I take after my mother. And so they did throw him on the bridge, and then there was a little jail. And I said small. On the other side of the river, where we lived, it's all good side. And someone actually looked at the more or less people that were on their radio to see what would happen, and they saw him being marched on a train early in the morning. Now, when we got up in the morning, it was a whole meeting, as I told you there. It was one guy that he didn't get. So he and all the women got together, and I'll never forget this, and the kids finally out, they didn't want to see everything. And I was sitting there, and it took this for quite a while, I think even now. I remember standing outside, and one part of the ground, I was looking at it, and my mind was saying, what are these idiots doing if they want to? They're not going to get away. What's all these plans? They're not going to get away from the German army or local police. But we weren't basically touched. We're not alone. There are a few things they did. For example, we have really to think of the German army, which was this all-conquering army, and it was very strong. But they were still pulling cannons with horses. Not all, but they were. And so the hearse, the Jewish hearse, that's separate Jewish, was also pulled by horses. They took that and threw it up a hill. And when you went to the train station, you saw it. It was laying down in the gully. And that led to something very interesting. Let's first go step by step. I don't want to jump all over. I'm going to get back to that. And we were kicked out of school, and our fathers were away. Now the Germans have a very simple method. I don't know if they still have it. I think they do. And that here, half the time it's not for me, it's for my wife. So,
You're talking about the German method of...
where was I?
The German method of...
What?
You said you were kicked out of the schools. You were kicked out of the schools?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we had to go to the city to the school. That I talked about last time, part of the youth. And, but what I was saying, what the Germans did, they made sure that prisoners couldn't get away. You were a complete baldy. You didn't, so you knew if you saw a young guy without hair, he must probably had been a prisoner, was a prisoner, was an escapee or whatever. And, but of course I didn't know that till my father came back.
How long was it? How long was it from Kristallnacht?
Yeah, my father was away for roughly 4 months. He was in a concentration camp. I don't know if they killed anybody. This was really an internment camp, but it was in Buchenwald, which I think is next to some of the worst death camps. And all the German Jews were there together, and a high percentage of them got out within 3 or 4 months period. And he came back home.
Did your father ever talk about what had happened to him at that time he was away?
Interestingly, in these things, he was like any other Holocaust survivor. Even my kids know a lot of this because they knew where the tape was. They listened to me. I never talked about it. I don't know why. We just don't. And now I do talk about it because it's very, very important that people know what did happen. And it's important to talk about it. Well, that's a separate subject. Let's stick to it. No, my father I did not know he was thrown into the liver. I heard the rumor, and I let it. As I told you, when I was in Yad Vashem, which is the Holocaust Museum of Israel, and I looked up, there's an encyclopedia, which I didn't find the next time I was there, in Hebrew, about German Jews which had the amount of men and women sitting in every synagogue. How many men seats, how many women seats, and when it got to, I'm not even at that anymore. She arranges matches for people, and she writes about it.
Oh, really?
A whole book on it. A booklet. Maybe when it comes Friday night, that's going to be interesting. I think we only have about 8 or 10.
Yeah, Friday night.
But that's normal for her. And, but anyway, so they did whatever they did.
And your father never talked about it? You never
And the synagogue was destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
We had services in a private home, in a private room, you could say. I mean, you know, the amount of people was getting less and less. People were trying to immigrate as quickly as possible. Emigrate.
I think
And,
the phone's on.
what?
Sorry, I think the phone's on. Yeah.
No.
I think it's, yeah, okay.
I'm kidding. It's
Oh,
slow.
I'm sorry.
So, and these very Orthodox people, Sabbathers, as I said, my father worked in a gas work and whatever else they worked in. Oh, they if they wanted to live, they better get to work. They worked in the city, and and to us, the young thing went to a different school, which was much nicer to Jews, it was all Jews, and the one we were in. So that was much. But there was no question that life was changing. And now my father, as I said before, he wasn't sure he could raise an Orthodox child in the United States. He wanted to raise a child. He wanted to get out. My aunt and uncle had left. They had left from Baba. My cousin had left. We were supposed to be born. And
Why didn't you leave?
what?
Why didn't you leave?
As I told you last time, my father said, I am not sure I can raise a child to be an Orthodox Jew in the United States. I just don't want to. And that was it. They had one child. They were going to do the best. It turned out it was all religion. And my father was someone who never really had formal education except for rudimentary. But he always studied. Always studied. Any class that was given that little town that he would get to, he was there. And when he retired, as his way years later, he was going from class to class in New York. Lecture here, study session there, yeah. This was it. He was an intellectual, or at least he could have been. He was both secular and Jewish. But now he wanted to get out, and you had to get papers. Now my aunt and my grandmother's sister, there were a whole group of sisters living in the United States, in Brooklyn. And they sent out the paper. We went to Stuttgart. Stuttgart was the place where you had the American consulate. And they started yelling at me in English. I didn't understand a word of English, so I yelled back. And I must have moved while I was taking the next one. They said I had a heart problem. And I was not able to get to the United States because I was a health risk. So it took another year and a half to get additional papers, additional people with anything happened to the child will take care of that. But everyday life is everyday life.
So you
Synagogue wasn't there. He was still swimming in the infested water. The house was still there. The garden was there, the plot of land that we had. The river was still there. Most people did. They had a plot of land. And we grew stuff. I suppose vegetables and stuff like that. No, we didn't grow anything fancy. There were no trees in here or anything like that. And basically, that was it. Yeah. There weren't too many airlines. We'll get to one, but that's way near the end. And but there were planes flying over, and there were attack. But no one wanted to bomb our little town. I think that one ever fell. And life was life.
Even if daily life activities were kind of the same, were you aware of anything going on in the background? Was there a different
No.
mood or anything?
I was aware that Jews were being picked on. I was aware that there was danger. I was aware that I couldn't do certain things, as I told you before, last time, that when something broke in the school, or a teacher got molested and we had to go to an afternoon session, my friend and I, we were warned, you don't do this like you do during the day. You hop the trains, you do this, you get out, you got to change trains. Well, there was a way of doing it, and then waiting at a different station, getting a train to one more step. If you like to, the other train is much nicer. We liked it. But we couldn't do that. At night, all the workers were there. There was basically all the Jews stayed together. They knew where they would all be, what particular coach they would get into on the train. And we did that too. We told us. So we knew there was danger. I mean, we weren't that stupid. We knew there was danger. We did not know, and I didn't think any of the German Jews knew at that time. There was a Holocaust, that people were getting killed. We didn't know that. And when the Jews were taken, they were taken from the settlement. Those workers were needed someplace else. No one quite knew. Some people suspected what was happening until they got to the camp. But then all of a sudden there was the selection. Right or left. One I know was for death, the other one was for hot labor. But we had no idea of that. I think people in the United States had absolutely no idea of this. Sam. We can talk a little about the Savior news war that killed a lot of innocent Jews. But we didn't know that till way after the war. And he was long dead. But to go back, certain things did happen. For example, let's go back to the Hearst. The Hearst incident, very interesting. We were the closest living to the cemetery. So normally, if someone passed away, and in Germany, you had to wait 3 days before you buried after death. Because it's 3-day wait. That was a law of the land, and nothing to do with Jews. Jews like to bury immediately. Law of Germany, they had to wait 3 days. So if someone, God forbid, passed away, they didn't stay or whatever, they wanted to stay in their house. There was one prisoner. He had no home. We were the closest thing. So he was in our living room. And for a long time. And even today, I sometimes feel it. Wood that was just hewn, and you could have that smell. And it's a good smell, a beautiful wood. Makes me sick. Because I remember getting up in the morning and walking past the casket, which may have been open. It may also have been open. And it was scary.
What kind of prisoner was he?
And then, of course, there was no more hearse. That's why you wanted the closest house. You had to carry it up there in a wagon or whatever.
So when was this in the town? This was...
This was after 38.
Okay.
This was after Kristallnacht. That's when there was no more hearse and so on. So that I remember one funeral. It wasn't this one. Where one of the girls, one of the granddaughters and nieces, great nieces, of whoever passed away, I don't remember who, she was wearing the BM uniform. That's the, I forgot what it stood for, but that's the Hitlerjugend. The women's part, the girls' part of the Hitlerjugend, Hitler Youth. That was like the Boy Scout, and that's it. Jews were completely excluded. And how she could be a member of this, we didn't know. I didn't ask. But when we walked past and the non-Jews were looking at the funeral procession and they saw her, their eyes popped out. But that didn't make sense. Who the heck is she? I don't know. But I do remember that particular funeral and the reaction and the stir it had in the crowd just walking, Jew and non-Jew. But you see, there was complete separation. In a sense, I suppose that you could compare it to the Deep South in the height of the bigotry. You know, separate bathroom, separate this. For example, I remember when we were in the school in Kassel, and Hitler came for a visit. For 1 week before, we were told, stay home. Don't come to school. Don't be seen in a castle. You look too Jewish. I mean, I thought that the German Jews of Kassel also hated. So yeah, you know, we were people who were just being tolerated because we didn't want the United States to pick on us. Meanwhile, the war's going on. And you know, the big fights. Poland in 3 weeks, France in 2 weeks. I mean, they were winning and winning big in the beginning. And as I told you, the radios would blast and every time there was some victory, oh, the music would play and the radio would blast and whatnot. So you heard the planes, there weren't American planes then, or British or anybody. Well, America wasn't in the war yet. And that was basically what I remember in the Holocaust. I do know that, as I said, there were 4 of us, and now I had left. There were other kids, but the 4 of us were one youth group. Year difference, 2nd grade and 3rd grade. And But I said, I mean, I understand. We were there. When I left, you see, again, our town was too small. We didn't have a rabbi. We had what you call a teacher. He taught the men. He conducted the services. He did everything. I know that they all went together to the Lichtenstadt, which was Pilsen. And that was a concentration camp where on the outside it looked like it was only settlement. They had music, they had this, they had that. And the inside, of course, was a concentration camp. But when people came, if the cross came, that's where they always checked up. And I know that the three of them were still studying together, and they had gotten into quite a bit. They had done very well. They studied well. Also, another thing. My father, as I said, was a shoe salesman. Now this I remember very clearly. And he had to get rid of all of his shoes. He wasn't allowed to do that anymore. But we now had empty shelves. We had a room of empty shelves. And one wall of shelves. Right before them. And those were used to store the learners' books that I know what they are, I have my own. But because I know some of them or maybe they were in the synagogue, I don't know. And they were saved, and here were shelves that were all being used, so we had them in our house. And that I remember. I didn't do anything with them. Didn't know what they were. I knew they were Jewish books, or Hebrew books, or holy books. Very, I mean, even if it would have been normal time, I wasn't ready to study that. So that many memories.
Do you remember?
But ask.
Yeah. Do you remember who mandated your father? Do you remember the day your father found out he couldn't be a shoe salesman anymore, or was that?
Oh, I don't know.
No.
I mean, you have to realize the chances are he wasn't even there when they took him away from him. He was in concentration camp apartments. They were all gone by the time he came back. They weren't there anymore, and he was told, worked in the gas works.
Who took him?
Just like that. Who took him? People took him. The government took him. The police took him. Who knows?
Were other people's businesses changing as well besides your father's? Was this a common thing that happened?
What?
Was this a common thing that happened? You were talking about your father losing his shoes and losing his business. Was this a common thing?
I don't remember. I just know what happened to him, but there were no more businesses, quote unquote, that the Jews of Germany could be a part of. They just couldn't. But, and I think it was different in different towns. In many ways we were well off compared to others, and in other ways we may have been tougher. But I remember when I went to my grandmother, my maternal grandmother in Bamba, there were many things that were going on because they had a tremendously big, empty yard at the front, I don't know if it's a yard, I don't know what you call it, but it was a big space. They had a very big house. And they would come, not ours. They didn't own anything, ever. But that was the place where the slashing was done.
Slashing?
From, all the wheat and corn, not corn, the American corn, which is barley, and that would be separated between grain and straw. And those were the machines that did it. And I loved watching them, because I would sit and tap and watch them pull in the grain, and then it would come out in sacks on one side and bales of straw on the other. And that was very normal. No kid if it was a Jewish showman, not a Jewish showman. This is the way they've done it for the past who knows how many years. They kept on doing it. I don't have to get paid anything. I don't have to get paid before, I don't have to get paid then. I didn't ask, I was too young, it's none of my business. I never know. I mean, you know, now as an adult you think about that. They thought about it too, but what do I know? But so life in that sense, look, when we left in 41, there was a 9-year-old kid. I decided to, and my grandmother wanted to spend a week or two with her. No, boy, I got on the train, got off the train, because I was, those last few months I was playing hooky. In August, school may have started, maybe missed a week or so. And I just went to stay with her. A lot of fun there, a lot of fun. Much bigger house. I didn't have anyone that had moved in like in our house where there were people who were on this front and that front, who were Germans, hard Germans, who were taken out of danger, and 2 rooms were given to them.
Can you explain some of who were the people who moved into your house?
What?
Who were the people who moved into your house?
I don't know. There were simply people who lived near where the fighting was, and they didn't want them to get shot at or hurt, and so they were relocated. There were 2 different families. I suppose it's the war moved on from one place to another. So I know it's just about a year and a half that we had.
So they were German soldiers?
They were Germans. And some of them spoke with a bit of an accent, so I don't know. It's the type of Germans, pure Germans. Germans that were not occupied German territories. I don't know, but I know they were by us. I think one family was husband by from one kid, the other one was a family husband by from 2 kids. And we got along. We were friendly. There wasn't any. I mean, no one was embracing each other, but we got along. We got along quite well. There weren't any fights. Not that I could tell as a kid. And I was enjoying it.
How long did they stay with you at a time?
Well, until the war moved on from wherever they were living. A few months, I have no idea how. I would say each about between 4 and 6 months.
And the thing?
And once was still there when we left. Oh yeah. They actually helped us pack and stuff.
When did your family finally make the decision that it was time to leave, and how did that decision come about?
We left in August 1941. Now, we left Kassel, Cuxhaven to Kassel. We went from Kassel to Berlin. There we were split up. My mother, voluntarily. There was no government. My mother and my grandmother in one spot, my father and I was a different family. They were not permitted to have any guests overnight. Jews were not permitted to have guests. That night of all nights, there was a tremendous air raid, and the bombs were bursting all around. And this was not the one for something, they were falling. And the ack was flying. You can see, must be my wife to me. And that's my wife. She wants to use my help. Oh, that was an accident. I didn't lock it. You need help? What? No, I'll have to.
Is there a button?
And meanwhile, the airmaid warden of the house, you know, a bunch of apartments, 3 floors, 4 floors. He says, everyone out, everyone out, it's everyone out, it's everyone out. And we don't make a sound, but then we said, if it gets any worse, they're going out. You can't stay here. They're scared and thank God it stopped. That was the British airline.
How did you get from Germany to Berlin?
No, Berlin isn't in Germany.
From your hometown in Germany is what I meant to say.
Germany.
Okay.
Now, this is how we got it. There were, I don't know how many cars, coaches. This was not the normal Holocaust thing, you know, there was a catalog. It was regular coaches. And there were assigned seats. And we happened to have been in the last compartment. The 4 of us and about 6 other people. There was 2. Everybody could sit. The problem was that we had to warn, don't take any big packages, because even now, you see them in the movies. That's the way the German trains are, the European trains. It's a very narrow path that you have to walk. And someone did take something, and was stuck. And everybody was on the train except for our family. There was no question that they were not going to hold the train. So my mother, blessed memory, she was on the very last one. She gave a push. And everybody fell. Then we walked in. She said, and there was another kid there my age. Even for a while, we used to visit each other. I mean, the families, the kids, we had different backgrounds, different aspirations, but still, we had gone through this. And the train went from Germany to France. It stopped in France overnight. I don't know where we stayed. We got bread and whatnot in France. And then went to Spain, and Spain had exotic fruit, which we had hardly ever seen. But Spain was a bombed out country because of the Spanish Revolution. So you just saw shells and poor people selling this exotic fruit for a piece of bread, or a loaf of bread. So people exchange. And while you're going, you have to, you look out of the window, and I mean, we weren't stuck in the compartment. You could walk out and there's walkway, and you look out, and about every, I don't know, 500 feet, 1,000 feet, you know, things going fast. You have no idea. There's a soldier with a gun. That's it. And they said, they're going on the railway. Look, if you do the sabotage on a railway, how are you going to get your water supply where they're supposed to go? Now, you can understand that. It wasn't because it was because they didn't know it. We then ended up in Lisbon, Portugal. It was about 2.5 days journey, I would assume. And we were supposed to be in Lisbon for a week. We were there about 3 days. And then we were told that the ship was sailing. And I remember, I can show you. I may do it if I remember to go to the box. I can show you my passport and a lot of other things. And picture of the boat. I think the passports are there. Flat out.
Not everybody's going.
I lost some, but I still think mine is on mine. And we got on this boat. We had a wonderful meal till we found out there was no kosher food on the meal, in the boat. And as we were Orthodox, there were a bunch of other Jews, not only German, who were Orthodox. So we had the same meal for 7 days. Oranges and hard-boiled eggs and bread. That was fine. We existed. For a while, my mother could not touch an orange. But you got used to it. And I can't tell you, we really talked a lot. The adults must have. I mean, the kids didn't. You got a friend or two, and that's it. I didn't go talk to any lama. I didn't know one of them was a lama. I had no idea. I'm a little kid. And we came to the United States, and we didn't know what Labor Day was. So you can imagine. The boat pulls up just before we're supposed to dock. Maybe 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 feet out, I mean. But you can see the land. And the anchor goes down, and we're stuck. We didn't know that was Labor Day, nobody was working, it was a holiday. Meanwhile, people are going out and waving to us, and the only thing we see is that Americans getting ready for war, and all around us there were ships. Well, I think it was a battleship, it's an awful lot of guns. So people were scared they were going to make us turn around, which they did due to this other boat that went the same way. They ended up in Cuba for a year and a half. Then Cuba was no Castro, as American possession, was very friendly to the United States. And when we got on the next day, we were picked up by my grandmother's sister and our aunt, and taken to Brooklyn. The new chapter began. Some of the things that I've discovered since then. It's like, I don't know who gave the orders in Germany. For example, when we went back the first time, which must have been 1978, we met a neighbor of my grandma who lived right behind that big house. The big house was still there. They wouldn't let us in. We didn't even try too hard. And he said that everyone was deported except for my grandmother. She was the only Jew. She was in the 80s, I suppose. 70s, 80s, left in this town. And you couldn't do anything with him. You couldn't talk to him. But he claimed that he came at night. Every once in a while, he brought us up to fish. We could have a good sport. And then eventually she was released. So that these things were happening. When we went back to the I told you about finding the cemetery. That's actually I get paid some based on my time. All taken care of. All done. But it's, and you couldn't have your friends or your friends, and it was difficult. I know we came to where I was born. The lady there who owned the house, well, my father did not have anything to do with this German house. He did take some money there, but he gave the house to the Jewish community of Germany to sell and to take profit for whatever they needed. She got, I don't know this. And she was a friend of my aunt's. She wasn't with us in the United States. And the problem was that the batteries had gone down. I didn't realize it. We made a recording of her talking to my aunt. She thought it was some fancy telephone. She kept saying, "To hers, to Marcia, to hers, Molly, do you hear me? Answer me." I was recording. She had no idea what I was recording. But it had recording. And very simple lady. We saw her later in Castle when we were leaving. Because we stayed overnight in Castle at St. College. And she was accompanying a sister-in-law. And very sweet, very nice. This whole thing of who wasn't helping the Jews, who was hurting the Jews, you can't tell. Whether you were really living in a time where, and I'm not trying to make excuses, because believe me, people of character don't do these things. But everyone did it. I mean, if you talked up, you could have gotten killed too. And it became a mass hysteria. I get rid of the Jews and we'll solve all our problems. And it's the Jews who are all the troublemakers in the war. And I'll tell you, that trip, my wife would not stay for more than 24 hours, 30 hours in Germany. She would not stay. The rest of the I'm in there. Then we're leaving under no condition will I stay. I want to stay longer. No. And we're walking, that time, we're walking through Frankfurt, beautiful park. And we ended up in some store. Could have been a Western Union. That was an American store. I mean, American company. And the woman said, yeah, they're going to be transferred to the United States. She said, you remember English, and we said, how are the Jews doing? Oh, look at the street, they own it all again. That same hate. This time from America. It's, anti-Semitism is a terrible, terrible disease. It's a disease, it's a hate. And you don't get rid of it. I know that people I know who went to Poland to see the camps, and they were told more than once by different Poles, what are you guys still doing here? We should be getting rid of all of you. You should know that how bad anti-Semitism was in Germany. It was just the engine that drove everything. The worst of all the countries, the countries in Europe was Poland, even now. Poland is a hell. They hate Jews. But, you know, that we know there are people who are proud, non-Jews, Jews, but a lot of non-Jews who did so much. Who did so much. Who saved people. Who hid children. And who ended up saving lives.
Did you ever see any of this? You're talking about how people helped to save the Jews, the non-Jews and Jews alike. Did you see any of that happening while you were still in Germany or
No,
traveling around?
No. The details come out. I'll tell you a story now. Maybe we shouldn't put this on the film. Catholics do not like this story. It's a true story. It's authenticated. If you know anything about the history of the Roman Church, of the Catholic Church, hundreds of years, about 100 years, 150 years, maybe longer, every pope was Italian. Right after the war, there was a little Polish, well, I don't know, little, there was a priest in Poland who was approached by a woman. She said, I want you to baptize my son. Fine. I baptized a lot of your children. But this one is, how old is he? 9 years old. Older. Every one of the children of you that I baptized have been less than 2 months, 2 weeks. I mean, he's 9 years old. Well, actually, he's Jewish. And I found out his family knows where he is. They live in some American city called Chicago. And I know once we baptize him, he's Catholic. He's not going to leave. The priest says he's not yours. He goes back to his people. And supposedly this child grew up, had a wonderful, haven't been Orthodox, but that's not important. Family, many important people. I know, important, but good people. You never heard of the Polish priest, except his name is John Paul I. God does not forget. He was rewarded. I'll tell you the second story, which is a book here. It's called Small Miracles. And the two Jewish women who might have it. It's not only by Jews. If you have a story, write in a story, and they're paperbacks. There's one that's not a paperback. It's one of my favorite Holocaust stories. But it's got the same thing, except it's all stories of the Holocaust. Small miracles. Nearly everything in this is very positive. Here's a story, it's authenticated by a mom I personally know. It was a world historian, by the way. There's an Israel who used to live in the United States. And this was told to him by a member of his congregation. And I've been in the synagogue, so I know the congregation. One of his members, one of the Nobel Prizes, embassies, men love the synagogue, mostly Americans. Phenomenal. This German, not Jew, just German, found out that his father had been a guard in one of the concentration camps. He got so disgusted, he left. He ended up going to Israel, not to be Jewish, We found out that one university was teaching the scientific course that he needed him, and he wanted to make his life's work. And he was not Jewish. There are 5,000 Germans living in Israel with similar histories. Found out about the band and just that. His niece was one of them. A bunch of people. And eventually, in Katz, he became Jewish. He met a German woman. They had 3 little boys. They looked like the normal Israelis with the side locks and everything, except they're all blonde and blue-eyed. Big deal. This is where the story gets interesting. All of a sudden, he gets a phone call, or a letter in the beginning, from his father. I've known where you have been all these years. I'm dying of cancer. Would you, and I know you have 3 sons, I would like to see them before I pass on. I need to perhaps have a look and listen. Did you with his father? He goes, not to this rabbi, a different rabbi. I said, he's your father. You must honor him. You must allow him to come. And he comes. And like a typical grandfather who knows he's dying, he's kissing his kids and holding his kids and doing all the things that a good grandfather did up as an important gift. And then he tells his son, I want to tell you a story. I wasn't always a god, but I was, one of my jobs was always to round up Jews to make sure that they would be killed. And one day, we went to this little town and we rounded up all the Jews. We just put it in the middle of all the concentration camps. And then one of the soldiers said, how do we know we got them up? Maybe some of them are high. So I volunteered to look for them. And there was no one there, and then I walk around the haystack, and I see, looking at me from that haystack, are 3 cute little boys. And I'm about to call my friends, I'm not sweet, to pick them up, and they're so cute. Forget about it. Let's see what happens to them. And I went back and I said, we got them all, let's get out of here. It's too bad they weren't 4 kids. I would be holding a 4th grandchild. That's what they call the war punishment. This ex-Nazi understood I did one good thing, God rewarded me with 3 grandchildren. Every time I read the story, tell it over again, it shakes me. I mean, we always think about the Jewish New Year's coming there, it's coming, it's next week. We talk about reward and punishment. He understood it. He understood it clearly. I'll get punished. But I got these 3 kids for the one good deed I did. And so there are many like that. We don't know them. But there are people well, they might not, majority, no way. And that's what I said, even President Roosevelt. There were delegations of rabbis that came to see him there was one mother who escaped to send maps of how we see the Holocaust. To us, it's just a continuum that started hundreds of years ago, thousands of years ago, and we can spot what happened in France, what happened in Spain, what happened, and when it happened, and when the anti-Semitic acts and the Jews being kicked out of Spain, 1492. They think they gotta have the money to equip those 3 little boats. Well, the money with the Jews. You either converted or you had to leave Spain and you left your money behind. And Ferdinand and Isabella needed money for some of their adventures. That's just a dress thing. It's just horrible. Started off 1492, 1496 in Portugal, France, Jew, Hebrew, both were born in the 1300s. England, the Jews were deported from England for, I don't know, a few hundred years. Whatever. So it's just a continuum, except this was the worst. I agree. This was the worst. And it's like, how could this happen? This indignity. I don't know. I mean, the question really is, how deep is the hate? How can it happen? How can it happen? But it did happen. And you know how you do it. It's not hard. We did it to the blacks. If you read the way of doing it, it's easy. You just make laws that say, these just look like human beings, but they're not human beings. They're cattle, they're this. And you can do anything. If I'm not a human being, how's that going to hurt you? If you're not a human being, now you can hurt me. All right, anything else? I'm getting into the preaching mode, and I'm really shouldn't.
That's me. No, it's an interesting.
All right, what's next?
I
Do you
guess-
need another time, or what?
Yeah, we will.
Yeah, we will need another
Do
time.
get some more
The
questions
holidays.
right
What?
now. I know we got like all over the place.
Yeah, we will need another time. Yeah.
Well, how about the Wednesday, 2 weeks from tonight?
2 weeks from tonight? Yeah, that sounds good.
And then did your holidays again, then we'll be at a 10.
Yeah.
So you need 3 or 4?
Okay.
Yeah, just 3. We'll just need it one more time. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I don't care. I enjoy this.
Great. Well, we do. Yeah, we do too. We'd like more. Yeah. I guess we can just plan the next one and then go from there. After.
Yeah.
Well, what do you want from the next one? Well, what specifically do you want?